Welcome to Ken's Corner Podcast, Season 4.
Hey everyone, it's Ken from Ken's Corner, and today I'm in beautiful Aurelia, the Sunshine City. Well, usually, Scott Morrison was saying he was here just a week ago, so he knows how beautiful Aurelia can be. I want to introduce my guest today. His name is Scott Morrison, and he is right now Senior Vice President, I believe, of Sportsnet Ontario. Did I say that right, Scott?
I'm actually retired, but
Oh, you retired. That's okay. You did hold that handle. I'm going to try and turn us up, make sure you can hear us. Okay, we're going to walk back to your start of your career and how you became a journalist. What led you to becoming a journalist and landing at the Toronto Sun in the early 80s?
Well, for whatever reason, and I can't remember why, but as a kid growing up, I loved reading newspapers, and I couldn't wait for the newspaper to be dropped at the door, and I'd be the first one there to open it and grab it and devour it. And I just had this passion for reading newspapers and for reading in period, and so I wanted from a very early age to be a newspaper writer, a reporter, and that was a pursuit that started, as I say, very young, and something that when I was in grade school, that I would put out my own little newspaper as a English project, and then in high school I started writing letters to the editor to see what I could get published and see how it would get edited and that sort of thing, and as I got older into my teens, I would go out and I would phone the papers and I'd say, I'm going to be at this minor hockey tournament or this other event. Do you want any coverage? And all I wanted to get was to see if I could get a byline or get a story in the paper. And the Sun really appreciated a lot of the work that I did in that early going. And while I was going to college at Centennial College to study journalism, they basically had me working 6 days a week because we didn't have a 7-day paper at that time. And so I was working full-time, part-time while I was going to school, and got my foot in the door that way by basically just saying, hey, I'm here, and whatever you need, I'll do it for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now, I believe you started in 2001 for Sportsnet Ontario and Hockey Night in Canada. Can you talk about how it felt getting hired to be in such a historic place as Hockey Night in Canada?
Well, I'd worked at doing the hot stove for Hockey Night and CBC for many years while I was at the newspaper. A bunch of us sort of rotated in and out on that panel. And as I said, as you mentioned, in 2001, I left the newspaper full time to take a job as sort of managing editor of hockey, to be on air and also build the hockey department at Sportsnet. And did that for 5 years. And then in 2006, I left Sportsnet to go to CBC Hockey Night full-time to do, again, to be part of their sports department and to write for their website and to do a lot of features on air for Hockey Night, and to also be full-time on the hot stove panel.
It is amazing, amazing story. My next question, I want to take you to the day that you were actually announced for the Hockey Hall of Fame induction for Elmer Ferguson Memorial Award. How did that become, and how was that feeling?
Well, the feeling was amazing, and that happened in June of 2006, actually just before I left Sportsnet, ironically. And we were out in Edmonton. It was the Edmonton, Carolina Stanley Cup final that year. And I was got a phone call that I was going to receive the Elmer Ferguson Award and effectively be inducted as a media person, a writing journalist into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and the feeling was just phenomenal. It's an incredible honor. The association with that hall is just amazing, and I remember we had a fabulous celebration while we were there, and to be acknowledged that way by your peers is, the old cliche. Nobody gets into any business, whether you're playing the game or you're writing the game or you're broadcasting the game. Nobody gets into thinking one day I'll get in the Hockey Hall of Fame. You do it because you love what you're doing and you try to do the best you can do. And to be acknowledged by my peers, that was just phenomenal, because that just puts a stamp on it that you can't believe. And so that day was incredible. And leading up to when the celebration and the actual induction happened in the fall in November was just incredible too. So it was just, and to be able to share with all your peers and family and all of that was an amazing tribute. And then I've had such a tie to the Hall of Fame, because subsequently I've been named to be, I've been on for the last 2 years now, I guess, on the selection committee for the Hockey Hall of Fame itself. I've been part of the selection committee for the Elmer Ferguson Award, the Media Award, and part of that. And I actually met my wife through the Hall of Fame, because we were both working at the newspaper at the time when the hall moved to where it is now at on Yonge Street in downtown Toronto. She was working in the advertising department. I was the sports editor, and we were one of the founding sponsors. And for the opening, we were putting out a special advertising section to commemorate it. And so that's how she was on the ad side, I was on the writing side, and that's how we came together. And so we've had a great history with the Hall of Fame, and there's no question about that.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. Thank you so much, and congratulations to meeting your wife at the Hockey Hall of Fame. That's a story in itself, right there, Scott. Now, you have authored many books. Now, the ones that have really caught my eye are 100 years, 100 moments. Now, that's very interesting. Of course, I'm a diehard Leaf fan, so the Matt Sundin book, Center of Attention. Can you give us a little synopsis of these two books?
Well, the 100 Years book was the 100th anniversary of the National Hockey League. So working with the league in terms of determining what the moments were, what the stories were over the years, over those 100 years, was a fun process in itself. And then to be able to write those stories, talk to a lot of the people who were involved in them, and whatnot. So it's a great coffee table book, and that you can pick it up and you can put it down, and there's lots of wonderful pictures in it. And as they say, the stories of the great moments, the great players, the great people who have been involved in the National Hockey League over those years. I think it's a terrific read, and for a diehard hockey fan especially, and even if you're not a diehard, if it's someone who just wanting to find out about the history of the league and what it's been all about, there's a lot of great stories there to bring you up to speed. And I've done so many books, and so many recently. I've got one coming out in a couple of weeks with Mike Keenan, the coach of so many teams, one of the greatest coaches in NHL history. I did the 50th anniversary of the 1972 Summit Series with Canada, Russia. Did recently just a book with Doug McLean called Draft Day, which is all about stories about how teams get built and what goes into the draft and how important that is to team building and the foundations of teams. And did a book with Rick Vive, former captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs, just recently. That all of those in the last 5 years. It's been a busy retirement time, but And the Matt Sundin book was, one of the greatest Maple Leafs ever. And Lance Hornby of the Toronto Sun and I conspired on that one and put it together and told his story and a fascinating story. And ironically, Matt's has got another book about himself, a much different perspective coming out this fall.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'm just going to ask you a little bit about some current happenings around the NHL. More specifically, I want to talk to you about the impact the NHL and the fans, the media, the players, the management are going to be of the loss of Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Gaudreau.
Tragic. I mean, there's no other word. Heartbreaking and absolutely tragic. I met Johnny a couple times, and you don't really get to know a person, but having read all the comments and heard the comments and just how deeply and profoundly this has affected so many people, teams and individuals, that I've got a greater appreciation of just how wonderful a person he was and is. And I didn't know his brother Matthew, but obviously coming from that same family, they were very, very similar and wonderfully loved. I can't think enough about. I lost my wife a few years ago, and I can't think. And I have a young son, but I can't think enough about how the impact is on the parents and losing two boys like that, and on the siblings on the eve of a wedding, and then with the wives, and one wife expecting a child and Johnny's wife having two young children, that it's just immensely and incredibly awful, and but they have left a mark, and they will not be forgotten.
And sorry for your loss, Mr. Morrison. My last question for you today, and thank you so much for coming and joining me here on Ken's Corner. I want to talk about the current Leafs and about Craig Berube joining the Toronto Maple Leafs. I want to talk about Austin Matthews and that captaincy, and a little bit about Nick Robertson and Mitch Marner. If you have any insight for us that you could share with us on the way out the door here today.
Well, Craig Berube is, he won a Stanley Cup, so you got to give him credit. I know Craig from his days as a player. Obviously, a hard-nosed player, a tough guy, but an honest, everyday worker when he played. And when he wasn't there just because of his fist. He was there because he could play hard and played hard all the time, and was an honest worker and a good teammate. And as I say, he turned that St. Louis team around in 2019, I guess it was, and did a terrific job there. So we'll see what he brings to this team. It'll be a different voice for those players, and probably a very different method from what they were used to with Sheldon Keefe, who I think was a good coach as well. But as I say, it's different. It'll be a change, and I'm sure he will challenge players in a different way. So we'll see what that brings. The Leafs are going to be a good team this season, and it still comes back to, what happens in the springtime, and we'll see if he can find some kind of change there. I mean, it was interesting the other day when Draisaitl was re-signed by the Oilers. One thing I saw in an interview with Stan Bowman, the general manager, and he talked about how impressed and awed he was by McDavid and Draisaitl, and with how they were able to take their game to a different level come playoff time. And he said, there's so many players that are great during the regular season, but he said, regular season is such a different beast than when it comes playoff time, and when teams can focus on you, and et cetera, et cetera. He said, but these guys have been able to rise above it, and they only fell a goal short of a Stanley Cup this year. And I guess that's the challenge for the Maple Leafs, for Matthews, for Marner, to Nylander, to everyone else, is to be able to find that next gear when it comes playoffs, and it's not easy to do. And it doesn't mean you're not a good player or you haven't given everything you've given or that you have if it doesn't work. But at the end of the day, you have to have the results. So um, I think giving Matthews the captaincy, I kind of thought was maybe 1 year too soon, but maybe it's something, a challenge for him to elevate his game or feel like he needs that extra motivation if that's necessary to elevate his game when the time is right. Marner, I think, is going to come out on fire this season for all the obvious reasons. I hope for his sake, because he doesn't deserve it, that he becomes a whipping boy for this team at any point when they have challenges or slumps, because his mistake is his contract came up at the wrong time. Otherwise, it would have been somebody else that would have been being challenged for it because he's produced. And again, like everybody else, he has to take it to another level come springtime. So, but I think he'll be a very determined player come this season, and will put up some big numbers for this team. And I think Matthews will too. And again, I'm curious to see what the goaltending is going to look like.
Yeah.
But Joe Wall is shown that he can be a pretty good guy, and Stollers is obviously was a backup on a Stanley Cup champion. And people talk about Wall and his injuries, but I look at them as being more sort of freak injuries as opposed to chronic injuries, which is to me is a difference. So it's not like he's battling a bad back all the time or a bad knees all the time or groin injuries all the time. And he's a very smart, intelligent kid. I think he'll be good. So as they say, they should have a good regular season, but I'll call me in April and we'll talk about it then.
Nick Robertson, does he move on?
I'm not sure what they're going to do there. I mean, I think there's an opportunity for him that he should be looking to seize, that they're not the strongest on the left side.
Someone's got to replace Bertuzzi.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as I say, I think there's an opportunity there, and sign a 1-year deal and go out and prove yourself, and maybe get traded during the season after somebody else sees what you're able to do. But because of injuries and playing times and all the rest of it, he hasn't had a large body of work that there's going to be teams that'll be lining up for him right out of the gate. So put some numbers on the board, and maybe it works out here, or maybe you get a suitor somewhere else. But that would be my advice to him: is don't sit out, because that's not going to accomplish anything.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, Scott. Okay, we're just going to play a quick game on the way out here. Okay. Toronto Maple Leafs in the playoffs: 0 wins, 1 win, 2 wins, 3 wins, or 4 wins.
So when you say wins,
series, I'm sorry.
Series, okay. Gosh. One series.
One series. Well, you know what? As a Maple Leaf fan, Scott, I'll take that one series. And
the one thing Leaf fans have to remember is that it's tougher than ever to win now. I mean, with 32 teams, and you look at, how congested the standings are, and it's going to be even more congested this year because Ottawa's going to be better, Detroit's going to be better, Montreal's turning the corner a little bit, but you still got Boston, you still Florida, you still have Tampa, and on it goes. So it's not easy, and it's not a shame. One thing I say about the Leafs, and there's been so much criticism over the years, and yes, they have not succeeded in those first rounds, but most of those years, the teams they lost to went on to win the Stanley Cup. So they weren't getting upset. They were just getting beaten by really good teams.
Yes. That's 100% true. Now, I had a friend once say, and he's a pretty smart guy. He says there's 32 teams in the NHL, 31 teams, franchises, fans, and management. Players go home pretty upset. One team goes home happy. That's how it is.
Absolutely. And it's not easy to be that team.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you so much for your time today, Scott. My name's Ken Judge, and I'm here on Ken's Corner podcast with Scott Morrison. Thank you so much for your time today, sir, and you have a great day.
Thank you, Ken, for having me. Take care.